John Kerry said, no, we're going to tax your health insurance. We're going to tax those evil insurance companies. We're going to impose a tax that if they sell health insurance that's too expensive, we're going to tax them. And conveniently, the tax rate will happen to be the marginal tax rate under the income tax code. So basically, it's the same thing. We just tax the insurance companies. They pass it on higher prices. That offsets the tax break we get. It ends up being the same thing. It's a very clever, basically exploitation of the lack of economic understanding of the American voter.
Hi, I'm Dennis Michael Lynch, filling in for Steve today on the Steve Malzberg Show. Joining me now is Dr. Betsy McCaughey, the chairman of the Committee to Reduce Infectious Deaths. Betsy, thanks for coming on today. It's nice to see you. I bet you President Obama is just ready to pull his hair out because this man just loves to have a microphone in his hand. What do you think about what Mr. Gruber has to say?
Well, of course, I've seen now Jonathan Gruber discuss at least 4 of the lies behind Obamacare. But we've seen the White House lie machine in full speed ahead now ever since the law was passed and even before then. The entire selling of Obamacare has been based on lies. You can keep your health plan if you like your health plan. You can keep your doctor if you like your doctor. You're going to save $2,500 a year. Preventive care is free. Only somebody who believes in the tooth fairy could believe this, right?
Betsy, let me ask you, why do you think the mainstream media is just completely passing over this gentleman's comments, especially about the stupid voters?
Because they didn't do their jobs at the time. Did not point them out. So now that Jonathan Gruber is pointing them out, the media seem just as dumb as Gruber's accusing the American people of being.
Well, let's get into something what I think is a little more important when it comes to Obamacare. On January 1, which is less than 2 months away, the employer mandate section of Obamacare is going to kick in, and it's an absolute job killer. So I want you to explain in the shortest way possible what that actually means. Who's subject?
Not just any health insurance. It has to be that one-size-fits-all government-mandated package of benefits that costs a lot more than what many employers are currently offering. And the irony is that this employer mandate is going to reduce the number of people who get on-the-job coverage. As many as 30 million people are going to lose their on-the-job coverage this year because of that employer mandate.
I know. Now, something I want to ask you, if they don't opt to give the insurance, they have to pay a fine. How much is that fine?
It depends. For most employers with 50 or more full-time workers, the fine is $2,000 per employee after the first 30. But in some cases, it can be $3,000.
Okay.
The real key here is it's going to clobber people who have always relied on the job coverage. It's going to be a bad deal for those people to now be forced to go to the exchanges and pay for their health insurance with after-tax dollars, see their deductible triple, and for all of that, lose the doctors and hospitals they've been relying on.
Betsy, now the thing I'm very concerned about is the president's talking about giving unilateral amnesty. And if he gives that amnesty, we're going to free up 5 million workers who aren't going to be entitled to Obamacare. There is an incentive for the employer who would otherwise hire an American and have to give them the Obamacare. Now we'll go and hire the provisional worker. Is that a concern to you?
It is possible. It's definitely possible. We'll have to see how that plays out. Let me also point out that legal immigrants are entitled to Obamacare exchange plans from the very day they're here. Illegals are not. But if you're in the country legally, you can sign up for that Obamacare plan and get it fully subsidized, 100% free ride from the day you arrive in the country.
You know, Betsy, I know you think that Obamacare is on its way out. Let's hope it is. Thank you for joining me today. It was great to see you.
Thank you.
We'll be back with retired General Paul E. Valley after the break. But first, have you wondered where the president and his family lived before there was a White House or even a District of Columbia? Well, let's take a look at the president's house before the White House with this hour's American Place.
Visitors to Philadelphia's Liberty Bell are greeted by a bizarre structure that looks like a half-built home. It is actually an important monument to a tumultuous chapter of American history. This rebuilt frame of a 3-story brick mansion built in 1767 was a key operations center during the Revolution. It was here then military governor and notorious traitor Benedict Arnold lived. After the British evacuated the city, it was within these walls Arnold hatched his secret plan to betray his country. But its most famous residents were 2 American presidents, George Washington and John Adams. President Washington moved here in 1790 with servants and a staff of 30. While living here, Washington held receptions, public audiences, state dinners, and open houses, making the residence the official entertaining center of a new nation. He oversaw a major expansion and renovation of the home, including transforming a washroom into the president's private office. Washington, a Federalist, was instrumental in planning and ratifying the Bill of Rights. From here, he even planned the future Capitol, which bears his name, in the newly created District of Columbia. But his time here also illustrated the complicated growing pains of a new nation. Washington, a slave owner, took advantage of a Philadelphia law that permitted slaveholders moving into town to keep slaves for 6 months. Afterwards, the slaves were to be set free. Instead, Washington rotated his slaves between here and his home in Mount Vernon. Some escaped. Washington's slaves were freed in his will upon his death in 1799. Our second president, John Adams, also lived here until finally moving into the newly built president's house in Washington in 1800. Tragically, by the 1950s, despite a public outcry, what remained of the house and outbuildings were completely demolished to make way for Independence Mall. The house was lost forever, or so it seemed. In early 2000, during construction of a new Liberty Bell Center, portions of the foundation of the president's house were discovered. More controversy ensued as officials toiled over whether to even acknowledge the mansion and how to best portray features as the home's slave quarters. History is not neat, reads one of the site's transparent walls. It is complicated and messy. This house exposes the core contradiction at the founding of this nation, enshrinement of liberty and the institution of slavery. A civil war would later resolve this terrible contradiction. I'm Lucy Celia, and this is An American Place on Newsmax TV.